Okay, well, I'll just go ahead and tell you a little bit about the seminar series. My name is Liz Ward, and I work for the Aeronautics Research Directorate, and we are co-sponsoring with the AIAA local chapter the Career and Professional Development Seminar Series. The purpose of the series is to try to give people, especially the younger people, the younger employees, and the students, different perspectives on careers. And so we've had a variety of speakers. The speakers have all been recorded. If you'd like to catch up with those that you missed, we can send you an electronic file or a URL to download it. And today we're very, very fortunate to have one of my favorite people at NASA, Dr. Richard Antcliff, as our speaker, and he's going to talk about his career. So I'm not going to tell you anything about his career, but I do want to tell you that I used to work for the man, and I loved it. I don't know how many years I got to work for Rich, but I started with Aero when he was deputy director under Darrell Tenney, and I think that was like 2001. And the first time I had any interaction with Rich besides that was at Oshkosh, and he was kind enough to come to Oshkosh to see what all the fuss was about at Oshkosh. That's the Experimental Aircraft Association annual shindig in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. And so that's the first time I had any chance to spend one-on-one time with Rich. And anyway, it was a really good relationship, and I'm so thankful that I was able to work with him. He's one of the best managers and best leaders that the agency has. And whether you realize that or not after his talk, I don't know, but if you ever had the chance to work with him, you would understand that he really is one of the finest leaders at the agency. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to my friend and my mentor, Rich Antcliff.
So I'm really glad to be here because the last 2 days I've been in a budget review, and this gets me to sneak out of that and go do something fun instead of sitting there listening to people wanting more money. So thank you for the opportunity. I don't have any slides. I'm actually just going to tell you a story, and the story is my story, to let you know kind of the stuff that has gone on and how I traversed through this interesting place that we call NASA Langley. I actually started out here as a contractor. I was brought in under contract for a company that was actually in Dayton, Ohio. I was brought into the hypersonic propulsion branch to do laser spectroscopy, coherent anti-Stokes Raman scattering in the wind tunnel, in the test cells actually there. And I was interesting was that the guy that brought me in, his name was Bert Northam. He actually co-signed for my home loan when I came. I was a contractor, and he co-signed for my home loan, not knowing anything more about me than he just hired me as a contractor. That probably doesn't happen today, but it was a pretty amazing thing for him to do for me at the time. Otherwise, I would not have had a house, obviously. I could not have afforded it. And so I worked there in the hypersonic propulsion branch, doing that work for about 5 years. At the time, my background was physical chemistry. I'm a physical chemist by training. So I was not an engineer. I still am not an engineer. And so at that time, they would not hire engineers into the non-engineers into the engineering organizations. And so they actually hired me into the instrument research division after about 5 years, to begin work there. And so, yeah, we used to have an instrument research division, for those of you who are new, a whole division that actually did work on advanced instrumentation. So that obviously is long gone. So I worked there worked in that branch for essentially doing the same work for about 3 or 4 years. And then something happened in my career. I went to my boss's boss and had a conversation about what my career aspirations were. And I said, at some point in time, I'd like to get into management. I think that it was one of those things for me. I realized that I was never going to be a Nobel Prize winner physical chemist. But I really did think I could maybe help some other people be successful. And so there was that click in my brain that I may want to look at this management track. So I had that conversation with him, and it was like 2 weeks later that he got back to me and said that the that the director, who was the director of electronics at the time, was really looking for a technical assistant. So I pondered that, and I went back to my manager, who was a section head at the time, right? We had section heads, we had divisions. Some of you are old enough to remember those times. I went to my section head and said, hey, this is an opportunity. What do you think? He said, absolutely do not do it. You have to be a researcher here at least 15 years before you have any credibility, before you should actually look at some of anything like that. So I ignored his advice and went on and took the position. So that's kind of my first lesson. You actually have to figure out for yourself what you want to be when you grow up, right? It's great to get input from mentors and others, but it really is your choice and your decisions as you go forward. And so that was actually a pretty incredible experience. I was the technical assistant for the director of electronics, who at that time had all the flight projects, had the electronics, all the instrument building work that was done here at the center. So I learned a lot about that. The other kind of practical thing that I learned, I remember one time he gave me this a report to fill out. It was like a 12-page report. He said, I want you to go take care of this for me. And I had that thing on my desk, and I'm just staring at it going, I don't know how to do this. I don't have a clue how to get this thing done. I'm just sitting there staring at it. So finally he came in and he pulls up his chair next to my desk and said, okay, how do we do this? How do we get started? Let's see, can you answer the first question? Oh yeah, I can answer the first question. But oh no, okay, can you answer the second question? So after about 5 minutes, I had the whole thing done, right? It was one of those things where my thoughts about how hard it was completely impeded me from getting started. And he said, no, just get started on question number 1, then go to question number 2, and move on, right? And then I was actually enabled to get the whole thing. So that was an important lesson for me, just about dagnabbit getting started, getting over that hump of fear around, oh my gosh, this thing is way too hard for me to possibly do. So I had that great experience in the technical assistant. I then went back to the branch. They then advertised the branch head position for that branch. I applied. The section head who told me not to take the other job also applied. I won the position over the guy who told me not to do it, right? So then he worked for me, which was an interesting dynamic for a while until he finally retired, which was good for both of us. However, so when I took on that branch head job, one thing was very interesting was that a week after I was in the job, I'd taken on the job, I'm a week in the job, all of the senior researchers in the branch came to visit me. They wanted to have a meeting. Essentially, their message to me was, we're all leaving. Thank you very much. But we've decided we're going to go to other organizations. I'm going to go here, I'm going to go there. These people want me, I'm going to go this and that, the other. And they were just kind of letting me know. So that was fun. So essentially what I said to them, okay, what is it that you're concerned about? What are your issues? So what was a 15-minute meeting on my calendar became a 2-hour discussion about what their concerns were relative to that particular organization. And I could go into all that detail, but the point was they had really good concerns. They had really important things that they were worried about and concerned about for the future. And so at the end of that meeting, I said, okay, well, give me 6 months. Give me 6 months, hang in here for 6 months, and let's just see if we can address some of these issues. So then we started moving forward. And yeah, we fixed some of those things. We didn't fix all those things, but it was really about us all getting together on the same page to actually move this stuff forward, rather than kind of being management against employee thing. And so kind of my second lesson there is just about listening, right? I mean, I actually had to hear what they had to say. Even though I had been in that branch, I had been away for a while, right? And I came back. They had a manager who was problematic, and they were just ready to get out of there. And so actually listening and then moving forward became very important. All right, so I was there in the branch for about 5 years. 5 years is about my tenure. Just as we go through this story, you'll kind of see. So I was in that branch for about 5 years, and then had the opportunity to go over to the program side of the house. Applied for and got a job over in the aeronautics program and ran the BIT program, which was the Breakthrough Innovative Technologies at the time. It was a cute little program that was very, very small, but it allowed us to do some really cool stuff, kind of like a NIAC program is today. But we were doing it here from Langley. So I ran that program for a while, eventually took on a portfolio of programs, eventually became the deputy director, as Liz talked about. One thing interesting about that deputy director position was that for quite some period of time, Daryl Tenney, who was the director, actually went to NASA headquarters. And so about 2 years, I actually ran the aeronautics program, even though I was the deputy director, because he was not here. The aeronautics program was going through a lot of changes at headquarters, and he was pulled up there to help them move some of those things forward. So the aeronautics program had a lot of fun time there, a lot of good movement forward. During that time, I applied for and was accepted into the SES CDP program. So this is the career development program for SESers, right? So there's the GS employees and then the SES employees. One thing about the SES employees is they kind of work for the president. So the president can say at any time, I don't want you here, I'm going to put you over there. So it's a very interesting job function that you're in the SES. So I applied for the SES CDP program, was accepted. And then I think that was the second time that I had applied. It took me 2 tries of applying into that program to actually get in. I got into the program, and then when you're in the SES TDP program, it's a very interesting program because you kind of set what you're going to do in that program. One thing that was clear, you have to have two detail assignments and some training opportunities. One thing I tell everybody is when you're in these leadership development programs, to suck the marrow out of them, get everything you could possibly get. You're not going to get a lot of these opportunities in your career, so I did, okay? So for my training opportunities, I actually took the opportunity to go over and do a study of universities and research laboratories in the United Kingdom. So I actually traveled all over England and Scotland and Ireland, talking to research organizations, universities, about what they were doing and and how they were trying to accomplish that. So I got a great piece of information and knowledge from that, and also had a fun trip all at the same time, right? That was all part of a National Fellows program that I got involved with, which also took me to Gettysburg, and had a great learning experience in Gettysburg as a part of that whole training piece of it. Then we had to do the detail assignments, and so I know they really wanted me to go to Westinghouse. For some reason, they thought Westinghouse was a really innovative organization, and I really ought to go to Westinghouse. I convinced them not to go to Westinghouse. I chose two other details. One was at NASA headquarters in Code B, which was the budget office. And at that time, there was no strategy office. The strategy office was actually in the budget office. And so to actually see the whole agency, Code B was an excellent place to be. So let me talk about that first, and I'll get to the second detail. So in order to get the detail, I had to talk to the agency CFO and say, hey, I really want to come up there. I really would like to work in your office, and et cetera, et cetera. He didn't respond to any of my emails. So I decided I really wanted to work for the CFO, and so what I did then was got in my car, I drove to DC, I parked my car, I took all my stuff up, I found an empty cubicle, I unloaded all of my stuff, and I began working for the CFO. Of course, he didn't know that yet. So I went into his office. He was not there, his secretary there. I said, hey, I want to see the CFO. I'm here to work on the detail assignment. And she said, oh, okay, I don't have an appointment for you, and he's in meetings all day. I said, hey, that's just fine. I'll just sit right here and wait for him to come. And so I sat in his waiting room, essentially, for most of the morning. He came in at lunchtime and saw me, nodded at me, and went to his secretary and she's going, right? So he comes over to me and goes, hello, Rich, it's so good to see you. We've really been looking forward to you coming up here. He was blowing wind, right? I mean, he just completely made it up, right? And I completely made it up in the back. So we had this great initial start to our meeting. He invited me in, and we then talked about what I was going to do for him. I made up stuff, he made up stuff, and it became a really great opportunity. So as a result of that, I went back to my cubicle, which of course was now my permanent cubicle, and began work. One thing that they did, they actually assigned me the responsibility for all of the agency performance metrics. I don't know nothing about performance metrics, but they assigned me, you are now responsible for the agency performance metric. So I had to interact with OMB and OSTP and what the agency performance metrics were. And by the third week that I was up there, they asked me to go to a national conference on performance metrics because NASA was the best practice in performance metrics, and I had to give a talk then on the agency performance metrics and how amazing job that we have done after 3 weeks of now being the agency person responsible for performance metrics. It was an interesting experience. And everybody's coming up to me saying, you guys are great, you guys are doing good. I'm going, oh yeah, we really pull it off here at NASA, performance metrics, right? But one thing I did in that function, one thing that was interesting is that, so I actually had to update the performance metrics for the next year. And so I said, well, we need to bring together a group, right, to figure out what the performance metrics are. And so I'm inviting the mission directorates and I'm inviting the centers. And then the guy that I'm actually working for says, okay, so why are you inviting the centers? What do they have to do with performance? So that was an interesting eye-opening experience from a headquarters perspective, right? And so I actually invited the centers in anyway. And we had this great dialogue around the tension between performance metrics at the mission director level versus what the centers see and what they're trying to do. And it actually came up with a nice, robust set of performance metrics that persisted for a while, you know, and those things change on a pretty regular basis at headquarters. So that was my experience in Code B. It was really good because, I got to work with all the mission directors, try to kind of see, and because I was working with their performance metrics, I was really seeing what was important to them and what was of value to them. So that was a really fun experience, and I learned a lot. All right, so then for my second one, I said, well, I really want to go to Disney. And they were like, okay, we have no contacts into Disney. There's no way, sorry, you're going to Westinghouse, right? This was the thing. So I just started a letter writing campaign on my behalf to Disney. Any address that I could find, of course, emails were not that big a deal at that point in time, right? So I'm writing letters, right, to the president, to the vice president, to the head of this, so I would search and try to find any address that I could possibly find, and I'm sending a letter to people saying, hey, free NASA resource will come to you and do good work. So finally, I got a response from one of those letters. And it was the guy who was actually the head of the Disney Imagineering in California, who said, hey, it'd be great for you to come here. We'd love to the resource, and let's see about doing it. So good. So then we start talking about how to do that, right? And then the lawyers engaged. So any lawyers in here? Okay, good. So I can say what I want. So our lawyers, we work a lot with our lawyers, and they're really good, but they really want to make sure that we don't go to jail, right? I mean, that's the fundamental thing. The Disney lawyers are even tougher than our lawyers. I mean, oh my gosh, they're all about intellectual property and stealing their secrets. And one thing I found out was that everything is behind really high walls at Disney. They're really about hiding and not knowing what's going on there. And so that was Disney. They just found out I was here. Anyway, so the lawyers are engaging, and we're battling this thing out. Time is ticking by, and I only have so much time. And so, I learned a lesson from my first detail, so I got on a plane, right? And I flew out to California, right? I rented an apartment out in California. I took my little bag of goodies, and I went up to the door of Disney, and I knocked on the door, and I said, I'm here for the detail. And they were like, who are you, right? And so what was interesting, right, so I get there 9 o'clock in the morning, and again, I have to wait in the outer room with the greeter person, and so people are coming down saying, who are you, what are you here for? Well, the letter, we lawyers, blah, blah, blah. So finally, somebody comes down probably around 11 o'clock and says, oh, come with me. So that he takes me, we go to the lawyer's office, right, and he says, this is the guy, the letters and blah, blah, blah. He gets the letter signed. By 1 o'clock, I'm working for Disney, right? It would never have happened if I had not showed up. No way. We'd still today be sending letters back and forth between the lawyers. So there's obviously a proactivity lesson in that, right? And trying to wait on the bureaucracy doesn't ever get you anywhere. You got to get in front of it. You got to move it forward. And that's a critical thing. So at Disney was a grand experience. As I said, I was in the Disney Imagineering group in California. At that time, they were actually designing the Everest exhibit that's now down at Disney World. And so to see them, what was really fascinating to me was I saw that they had some of the best engineers I'd ever seen. Okay, and I'm from NASA. So the best engineers I'd ever seen. And they had some of the best creative people I have ever seen. But their power was that they respected one another, right? These guys knew these are the best creatives. These guys knew these are the best engineers. So when they got in the room, there was none of this, well, this has got to be about me because it's creative and you can't change that, right? They didn't do that at all. You never saw that in the conversation, which was fascinating to me because, I don't know, here sometimes we have weird dynamics in meetings. I'm from this organization, or I'm from that organization, or I'm this kind of person, or I'm that kind of person. And we get into all that. They had figured out how to overcome it, and it was really about respect, right? They really respected each other in the room. They could have some really challenging and dynamic conversations, but they had it on the basis of respect, and so that was really good. The other thing to kind of end up my stay there was right at the time that we had the Challenger accident. At the same time, they had a really bad accident at one of their theme parks. If you remember, one of the trains had actually flipped over and killed some people. And so I actually started a conversation with Disney around kind of the lessons learned from Challenger and how they could take that into lessons learned for their own accident, and actually had to then go up to corporate Disney and talk about it and go to several of the different facilities and kind of talk about Challenger and how it applied to their issues. So it was very useful for them in that. The other thing I will say is when I first got there, they said, hey, we got this job for you. One of the problems we have is that the water in our theme parks, we really want it to be blue. And sometimes it turns a little green. And since you're a chemist, we really want you to go in there and fix the water. And I said, I ain't doing that job, right? So I had to have a little negotiation with them up front on what their expectation, because I hadn't touched wet chemistry in probably 20 years at that time. And so to expect me to go into the lab and start creating blue water was just not something I was interested in doing. And so, again, we worked that out, negotiated what I really wanted to do, what they could get out of me, and it turned out to be a valuable experience. All right. So SES EDP then is over. I've had my training. I've had my 2 details. I came back to the center, and when you then you have to write everything up, and it takes 300 years to write everything up on what you've done, what you've learned, and et cetera, and then you have to submit this to headquarters. As it turned out, I got my write-up stuff done early, relatively early compared to a lot of the other folks in the program. And at that very same time here at the center, some of you will remember, General Bridges was here as the center director, and he decided to recompete all of the senior leaders of the center. So all senior management lost their jobs, and they all had to recompete for their jobs. That was a fun experience, I got to tell you. It caused huge stress amongst the senior management, as you might expect. But we all had to recompete. It was a very structured process. There was a structured interview. Then they took you through some scenarios where you were given some information. You had to say, okay, what would you do? Then you had to stand before a panel and talk to them about what you would do in that situation. They would grade you and ask you questions. It was hugely stressful. And me, I hadn't even lost my job, right? These other guys were in a very, very difficult situation. So as a result of that, I actually did very well on the testing, and then came back out, and they decided what to do relative to the senior leadership. And so at that point in time, we were also facing the potential of a RIF. Some of you may remember in that time period. And so General Bridges asked me to take on an interesting task, which was to take over an organization which at the time initially was called the Incubator Institute. It's called the Incubator Institute first, and it was really to take all the people who were thinking about riffing. We're going to put them in an organization, and Rich, we want you to get them to do good work. That was a really fun, that was exciting. Honestly, I thought it was a pretty cool opportunity. And it was really a cool opportunity to change the whole thinking around that, right? We actually had some really excellent and amazing people in that organization. We changed the name from the Incubator Institute to the Innovation Institute, and then talked about how do we become more innovative here at the center. We did a lot of fun and interesting things during that time. Developed some new classes, we handed out popsicles one day. I mean, it was just a lot of interesting things that we did to try to get the whole organization to be more innovative. We actually went into the organizations and had conversations about innovation. What does it mean? What does it mean to you? What does it mean to your organization? And tried to change the ball from there. That organization changed its name about, once a year. We were the Innovation Institute, then we became APPO, Advanced Planning and Partnerships Office. And then other organizations came in, and we brought in education people at one time, and then we were Office of, I can't remember. What? Before that, there was another one. That one, yeah. I don't know, there was some other names we just made up along the way. Then eventually we became SRO, Strategic Relationships Office. And then a funny thing happened on the way to the church. We were having such a good time, we forgot about our customer. And this was kind of my last really important learning through all this process. And we came to, and a center reorg came up, and they said, okay, what does this SRO group do again, and why do we have them, and what's their real purpose, and what are they giving me as the center director? And the answers were struggling. It was not clear what the purpose was and what we were trying to do. Now, it wasn't because the people were not doing good work and it wasn't very important work, is that, frankly, I had done a lousy job of really talking about the organization and making it clear what the value proposition was for the rest of the organization. So at that point in time, SRO got split apart into several pieces and went various places. At the same time, there was a real move afoot. Lisa was center director at the time and said, hey, we really need an organization to help the senior leadership make better decisions. Because we're finding that we're making decisions about this thing, and we're not considering this thing over here, and we're not considering this thing over here. We really want to have integrated decisions. And so she asked me to stand up an organization that would really help them make those integrated decisions. And so that's where OSAC-B came from. That's the organization that we're heading up now, Strategic Analysis, Communications, and Business Development, which is really to help the center make better decisions, to give them the strategic context to make those decisions. So we're responsible for all the retreats and all of the strategic planning that gets done in the organization. So that's been, honestly, a lot of fun, and it's been a lot more structured work than we were doing kind of in the SRO II days. But again, a new learning experience, which is important. All right, so that's where we are today. So I did want to go back and give you my ABCs. Here's my ABCs of how to do well at Langley. One is, A is attitude. It's unfortunate that some people come to work with the attitude of, this is not going to be a fun day. This is going to be grueling. I wish I wasn't there, right? Attitude makes so much difference in whether you actually enjoy your job or not. Bill Klebb gave me this phrase several years ago, and I continue to use it, and that is, if you don't like your job, change your job, or change your job, right? Either change your job or change your job. You get that? Or do I have to explain it? I don't see all heads going up. So change your job as in recreate the job that you have, right? Or move on to something else, or change your job. And I think that's, I just ask you guys to think hard about that. If you're coming to work and you're really not enjoying what you're doing, and it's really not, then change your daggum job. I was the center chief technologist for a while. The reason I was the center chief technologist is because I named myself the center chief technologist. I decided one day I was going to be the center chief technologist. So I developed business cards. I put Center Chief Technologist on it, and I started handing them out to people, right? Did anybody designate me Chief Technologist? No. Then what happened? What interesting happened is at headquarters, they decided we need to have a Chief Technologist at the agency. They hired Bobby Braun. And then Bobby said, well, I need to have a Chief Technologist at all the centers. So they came down to the center and said, who's your Chief Technologist? What did they say? Rich Antcliff. He's our Chief Technologist, right? So change your job or change your job, right? You actually have a lot more opportunity to change your job. Am I in trouble? Okay, keep going. So change your job or change. So attitude. I think the other thing in that is assume positive intent. People, you have to interact with people, right? And if you can assume that they're actually working out of good motives rather than bad motives, rather than they're really trying to get you. I remember this grand story of a lady goes into the subway, right? And she's in a subway car, and there's a man across from her in the subway car. And he has two kids that are just driving her crazy. They're jumping all around. They're bouncing off the walls, right? And so finally she's frustrated. She goes, listen, what is going on with you kids? Could you please control your kids? And he looks up and says, gee, I'm really sorry. They just lost their mom, and they're not exactly sure how to handle themselves. You know, and it's just like, realize that everybody is going through something, right? And assume positive intent. Assume that they're not out to get you. Maybe they just had a really bad day. Maybe they just lost their mom, right? Maybe something tough is really going on in their life. Assume positive intent. Don't just assume, well, that guy's a jerk or that guy is out to get me. It's probably not true. There's other stuff. People's lives are riddled with stuff, and they're all living out this existence and trying to figure it out. So if you can help them grow rather than be part of the problem that they have, you're going to make it a lot further. So attitude, assume positive intent. The second B is really about being bold. To be honest, we have plenty of small thinking people. We have enough. We don't need any more. Okay, we really need those people who are going to say, I just want to do this, and they go and do that. They go and make that happen. So I have a lot of people who come to see me and say, I'm really trying to get this to happen, and I don't know how to do it, and I don't know who to talk to. And that's all well and good, but if you don't ever try to move anything forward, you're never going to move anything forward, right? If you don't ever try to do something bold and exciting and creative, you're not going to do it. If you think it can't be done, it can't. If you think it can't be done, it can't be done. If you think it can possibly be done, it probably can be done. It really. And the other thing is, Dennis Bushnell has a great statement that is, money always follows good ideas. And it's absolutely a true statement. And we don't take advantage of it at all here at the agency. Money follows good ideas. When we bring good ideas forward, they get funded. They get money coming to them. But you got to bring them forward, and you got to be persistent, and you got to go knock on the door, and you got to actually make sure they hear you. But money goes to good ideas. And if you just sit back and say, nobody's ever given me any money. I got a really good idea. It's in my drawer. They just come to me, I'd open the drawer, and I'd show it to them. Be bold. Go out there, put yourself on the line with your big idea. Money goes to big ideas. C is about connections. When people come here, and we ask them, why did you come to NASA? They typically say, well, it's because of the great work that you do. I want to do something really cool. You guys are doing cool work. I want to be involved with that. When people retire, what they don't say is, I'm going to miss the great work. I'm going to miss all the cool things that I did. What they say is, I'm going to miss the people. Right? I'm going to miss all those friendships that I made, all the connections, the interactions with those folks. That's what I'm going to miss. So I just want you to recognize that there's huge value in the connections. There's huge value in the people that you're going to interact with. Don't stay in your closet and say, well, I gotta be the best in the world, and I'm going to strive to do this. And I know for a lot of engineers who are eyes, right? What's that called? Introverts. I knew there was a word. For those folks who are introverts, that's tough, but man, the connections are critically important. Not only because it enriches your life, but it actually helps you to get things done, right? It's because I know somebody, it's because I know Bill Klebb, right, that I was able to get things done because he's cool and freaky weird, right? So it's because I know people like that we can actually get things done. Isn't that right? That's a correct statement, right? So, so make those connections. The other thing I would say about connections is get connected to something bigger than this place, right? This place will cut your budget. You won't get the promotion. There'll be things when this place will not be your friend. So make sure you're connected to something bigger outside of this place. Now for me, that's my relationship with God, okay? That's critical for me to be anchored and founded, so when this place goes nuts and I'm going, what in the world? I have something to actually anchor myself and stand on. So I just implore you, get connected to something bigger than this place. This place is not your mother, it's not your father, it's not gonna take care of you when you're sick. Get connected to something bigger. And then D, my last one, is really about fun. So nobody caught that? D is about fun? Okay, well, I just thought I'd try. You got to make this place fun. You got to do some things. I really think we need a resurgence of practical jokes. There was a time when practical jokes were the thing around here, and people were doing all kinds of weird things to each other. I think there needs to be research. Bill, you up for it?
If you're not in trouble, I doubt you're sincere.
So let me talk about that a minute, and that is about being in trouble. I had an employee come on a couple of years ago, and during performance appraisal time, I said, "You're doing really good work, but my biggest problem is no one is complaining about you. You haven't gotten in trouble with the system." Right? And this person in particular, I wanted to push the system. So for me, getting in trouble is a really important milestone and marker of someone who actually is pushing against this bizarre bureaucratic system. And so I really expect that of my employees, that they're getting in trouble. I think everyone should strive to get on NASA watch at some point in their career, right? Right? Because they've done something stupid. And I've been on, I think twice, maybe 3 times. So striving to actually push back on the system. I love the little book, Orbiting the Giant Hairball. If you haven't ever read that book, it's a wonderful book, which is really about, we have this bureaucracy, but actually to be successful, you really need to orbit the bureaucracy and be outside of it. Be still connected so that you can get food and supplies, but you got to be outside of it so that you not get trapped in that bureaucracy and try. And frankly, when we set up the II, the Innovation Institute, it was really to be something that orbited completely around the hairball. Unfortunately, we got detached from the hairball, and it got us in a little bit of trouble. And so, but that's important. So I just, again, fun is critically important. You got to have it, make it happen. You need somebody like Garnet in your organization who just laughs all the time and drives us all crazy. So it's really important to have fun. So that's my ABCs, and I think I'm done. I'll be glad to answer any questions about my journey or anything else. I pause. Ma'am. Thank you.
If anybody has any questions, would you use this mic so that it could be recorded?
She has one over here.
Could you tell us a time about when you actually did get in trouble, and what did you do?
So, I'll take the big one. The big one was this whole disappearance of SRO. I was in trouble, right? The whole organization, they were saying, we're gonna dissolve this organization. We're gonna take all these people and throw them to the 4 winds. So what I had to do then was come up with an alternate plan that fit into the bureaucracy, but still allowed us the freedom to do some other things. And so what I did was counter-proposed, right? They said, we're going to kill you, we're going to throw you all to the wolves. I said, okay, what about if we actually go over here with some bears and some chickens and stuff rather than actually do that? So for me, it was about counter-proposing, right? Rather than accepting what I heard, it was counter-proposing, give them something else that was actually a viable alternative. So, yeah. He's not allowed to ask questions. Oh.
Okay, I've got a question from Matt Malin at Kennedy. He wants to know the awesome things you did to get on the NASA watch list.
So 2 things that I did to get on the NASA watch list. Well, first was I started a blog. And I used NASA resources to do the blog, and I actually expressed my own personal opinion rather than the NASA opinion. And particularly, there was one particular blog entry which was what I want from NASA for Christmas. If you do a Google search, you'll probably find it. What I want for NASA for Christmas, and it was, let's just say, not exactly a wonderful espousing of NASA in what I wanted from NASA. Well, that went viral, and because it got on NASA Watch, and then everybody was on NASA Watch, went there, the thing exploded. What's interesting is, so the writer of NASA Watch actually contacted me about it. We actually had a great conversation around it. So this is one of the times I kind of got in trouble, so I had to actually take the blog down because I was using NASA resources for my own personal opinions, which was not allowed. The second time I got on NASA Watch was really, I'm pointing to you, but it's the guy on the phone, right? I said, hi. The second time I got on NASA Watch was around tech transfer, where we were doing some interesting creative things in tech transfer and trying to get the word out to the public. And so then the issue was the NASA Watch guy said, wait a minute, this is not coordinated with headquarters. You're doing something outside of the official program, which is we were. We were doing something creative and innovative outside of the normal program. And so he was very concerned, and he kept on, and I, again, we communicated. I told him he was probably mistaken, but he was very sure he knew exactly how the government should work, and so he just rambled until people got tired of hearing from him about it. So those are the 2 times that I remember. I was thinking there was a third, but I can't remember what it is right off the top of my head. I keep looking at you. Look at you. So, anything else?
How you doing? So how did you develop such a thick skin towards like disappointment? Because, I mean, technically you could have went to Disney and they could have kicked you out, or you had those setbacks with the organization that got canceled. How do you say, all right, it was my fault, let's keep moving forward, or what causes you to be that way?
That's a good question that I'm going to answer honestly and perhaps not the way you would expect. For me, it takes me back to my letter C. For me, it's about me knowing who I am and my own personal worth, which is not dependent upon whether the CFO kicks me out or not. It's not dependent upon whether Disney kicks me out or not. It's dependent upon my relationship with God. So this is just me. I'm not proselytized, it's just me. But for me, because of that, I can do anything, right? I can go and slap you in the face and you can kick me, and it's like, this has nothing to do with how I think about myself, right? What you think about me is irrelevant to how I think about myself. So that's my thick skin. It's completely dependent upon where I get my value from for who I am. So if I fail at this thing, no big deal. What's the worst that could happen? I could die. This is a good thing, right? So in my value proposition, no issues here. So that may not be what you were looking for, but that's who I am.
So when you were sitting in the CFO's office over at headquarters for 3 hours, must have been.
So this was headquarters DC.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was going through your head while you're sitting there waiting for this guy to come back and maybe say something to you?
We didn't have phones with emails at the time, so I was probably reading something. Honestly, there was nothing going through my head. I knew eventually he would show up, and what I thought was I would convince him to take me on at the job, but he flipped it around by faking it, right, that he actually knew who I was and moved forward. So I had no concerns about that because I knew I was going to be able to convince him that he should take me on, because they needed detailees at headquarters, and I was there free, and I was already there, so that's what, if anything was going through my head, it was just kind of maybe working through what I was going to say to him when he came in.
Okay.
Behind you.
This might be too personal, but I know for the young and emerging, continuing emerging professionals on center who are starting families or have young families, how did your family adapt to, I mean, I think of Joe when you say, okay, I'm just driving to headquarters and I'm going to sit there, or I'm renting an apartment in California, and I'm sure you had kids at that time. So how did they adapt to that? How did it affect your family life?
Yeah, she thought I was crazy, but that's not unusual in our family. So I will say that I'll just be totally honest with you. There was a time where I overdid it with regard to work. Both work and church. Between the two of them, I was so over-involved, I was not doing what I needed to do at home. And so I had to reassess. I had to do some reassessment on that and recalibrate and step away from some things both at work. I had to step back from things I really wanted to do, and then some things at church that I really wanted to do, I had to step back from in order to, and so that was, so I would just say, you know, one thing that's really critical is that you have a conversation with yourself about where are you and what do you really want out of life, and what is this really what I want the end result to be? And so there was a time when I remember I was in that weird state and I had to have that conversation with myself to step back. You got to get that balance right. It's more important to get that balance right than to do that next project and be the cool kid.
I'm the guy next to you. You spoke about a vision for Langley, about having big thinkers, more big thinkers and not just small thinkers, about having more practical jokes. Could you tell us more about your vision, about how Langley could grow?
So there's a lot of ideas that I hear around the center that I don't think bubble through the system. And so, listen, I think one thing that we just got done with let me go at it this way. We just got done with a senior leadership retreat a couple weeks ago. All the senior leaders went away and talked about kind of where are we going in the future. And it was really focused around, Dave Bowles has kind of laid out this new value proposition for the center. What is really important to us? What do we really want to focus on? Which is really about that kind of mid-TRL level of activities, those things that are really application research, right? So I think there's a place where we can really step forward in the agency to do that. Now that requires, the problem is the agency right now doesn't really fund that very well, right? They really fund the high TRL stuff well, the low and mid TRL stuff not so well. So that means we actually have to go to headquarters and convince them that this is something really important to do, right? So that means we have to go to headquarters and get in their face and really convince them that this is something to do. Now, they may get mad at us. Okay, then we go back the next day and get in their face again. I think we're somewhat risk averse relative to our relationships with the people at headquarters, and we don't want to confront them with what the reality is. So listen, so this isn't being taped or recorded, right? So I can say this. No, I know it is. You know, we got a real issue now with regard to the vision that we're sending forward relative to going to Mars and the reality of the budget situation that we have, right? We're honestly not being honest about the situation that we're in relative to the funding stream and where we can actually go to. Why are we not doing that, right? Why are we not having those honest conversations? So I'm just telling you that we have got to have those honest, we need to be bold and have the honest conversation about what we can really do and what the timeline really should be going forward. And Langley can bring the technologies, the technological expertise that it has to really weigh in on that conversation in a very important way. I'm asking you guys to be a part of that boldness, right? To actually push against the status quo that says, no, we got to do this because this is what Congress has approved and this is what Senator so-and-so thinks is important. You guys got to bring the technical alternatives and push it in a bold way. I'm asking you to. The other thing I'll say, there's something interesting going on at headquarters that you guys need to think about. For years and years, the agency has been a political lever for the country, right? Kind of starting off with Apollo and the Russians and all that. We're a political lever. Right now, the Congress and the White House don't see us as a political lever. They see us as an economic lever, right? They see us as part of the R&D base of the country, that we supply new technologies that helps our economy grow. NASA hasn't figured this out yet. They're still thinking of themselves as a political weapon and not an economic weapon. So it's just something you guys should think about as you move later into those conversations. What are we here for? What's our real purpose? What are we trying to accomplish? Yes, going to Mars, but why? Is it so we can beat the Russians, or is it so that we can bring technological excellence to our country and therefore more jobs, et cetera, right? I think that right now the country's over here and NASA's still over here in this conversation. I think there's an opportunity to think about that a different way. And you guys could make that happen. The other thing I would say is I'd love to have you guys visit me. Share with me your ideas. Tell me what you're running into that is driving you nuts so that I can help you find out how to get around it. I love doing that. So. I have a question. Yes, ma'am. Need the mic? The mic?
In all the years that I worked with you, whether it was Aero or AIAA or whatever, I noticed that you were always a giving, generous person, financially and otherwise. Always giving people the benefit of the doubt, and if there was money that was available and somebody needed it, you didn't mind sharing it. And I had a conversation with Beth Plinovich once about that, and we know that that's your mode of operation. So could you share with people how you're able to do that and not worry about the consequences as far as having enough money yourself?
So she's not talking about this money, right? She's talking about NASA money, just to be clear.
Yeah.
Even though I told you about the guy who actually co-signed my loan, right? It's amazing. And I'm hoping that there's nobody from the budget office online as I say these next things. Listen, we've been given $19 billion. That's a lot of money to do cool stuff. Congress wants us to do cool stuff, right? So if you have an idea to do cool stuff, and we can take money from here and there and put it together and make that happen, Congress is going to be happy, right? We get a little over-worried about, well, it's in this box, so therefore we can't use it for that. I'm not worried about such things, right? So this is how, it's not that I don't have any money, but I know where all the money is. And so trying to get you connected to the right people who have the money and trying to find and pull resources together. Michelle and I are working now on the centennial, right? And we have our 100th birthday coming next year. This is going to be super cool, and Michelle's doing an awesome job in pulling it together. But we've gotten about $2 million from the center to actually pull that off. Well, we've gotten over $2 million from other people outside the center who just want to play with us. Why? Because we brought a cool idea forward, and they want to give us stuff. And they want to give us money, and they want to give us people just because it's a cool idea. We brought some really cool ideas forward. So I go back to, for me, it's the Tom Sawyer principle, right? So, right, the painting the fence, right? It's the same principle, right? You got to get other people to help you paint the fence. Why? Because they love painting fences. The kids painted the fences not because he forced them, because they loved painting fences. So you just got to get other people to convince them that painting fences is great. It's the best thing ever. And they just throw money at you, right? So that's the thing. It's really about what is it that you really want to do? Is it really cool and exciting? Can you then get it into his framework, who has the money, to really say, yeah, well, I want to play with that. I want to do that. I had a guy just the other day said, Rich, if you got any cool ideas, come to me. I got this money and I don't know what to do with it. Right? I mean, so, yeah, that's how. Cool ideas. Money goes to good ideas. Bring a good idea. Make sure you frame it in the customer's perspective, so it's something that he really needs. Money flows.
Question about, because we have, you have like the incentive challenges that come through our emails. How do you put that on your WBS? Is I'm gonna spend a week working on, like, for instance, making sure water is blue or something like that.
So I'm not going to smack you, but so our administrator said that you are allowed to take a percentage of your time, up to 10%, and work on whatever the heck you want. So, you want to take a week? You want to put together a proposal? You have the administrator who said it's okay. What's your problem? I'm just going to leave it there. Yes, sir, Bill.
I got a comment in the spirit of being bold and getting in trouble. So our propulsion, our spacecraft propulsion technology, to use an analogy, is equivalent of a canoe and a paddle at crossing oceans. Why are we talking about going to Mars? If we want something bold, Charlie Bolden should stand up in front of the nation and say, we're going to take 10,000 people to a nearby solar system by the end of this century and focus on the propulsion research to actually enable it instead of paddling around with a canoe paddle.
Yeah, so what I would say is Charlie Bolden can't say that. But you know what, Bill? You can. Right? You can. So this is the point. We continue, this is a NASA problem, is that we continue to say, if only my boss, if only NASA headquarters, if only Congress. No, it's you. Right? You have to actually come forward with that idea, bring it forward, and then make it loud, such that then something happens. And then you got to convince the people on the outside. You got to write a blog that gets you in trouble so that people actually listen. Yeah, don't wait on Charlie Bolden. By the way, he only has a couple months.
Yeah.
I think we're at our hour. So thank you all very much. I enjoyed it.